Hi, this is Sarah Burgess from 1080 and welcome to our very first Leadership LinkedIn Live. So I'm joined today by Joan O'Connor, who heads up our Leadership Development section, and also Julie and Craig, who I'm going to hand over to introduce themselves in just a moment. As we go through today's session, please do ask us any questions as we go through so we can make it as interactive as possible. Let us know where you're in from, etc. So over to you. So Julie, do you want to go first with your introduction?
Yeah, hi, I'm Julie Harrison. I've just recently joined Resolution Life as the Chief HR Officer. We're a life insurer in the secondary markets. And prior to this, I've spent my career in financial services, mainly in business partner roles.
Excellent, thank you. And Craig?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Craig Patterson. I'm the Chief People and Technology Officer for a company called Air Partner. We're an aviation services business based down in Sussex, but we're a global organisation. Prior to Air Partner, I've worked for a range of different businesses in different sectors.
Brilliant, thank you. So Joan, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Craig and Julie, for being here today and for being willing to discuss collaborative leadership with us. We did some research in October 2020 around, leadership and what was happening for people around the trends of what they thought were making great leaders and what we'd need to have in leadership in the future. And one of the themes coming through was the importance and significance of collaborative leaders. So we're really interested to hear your views today. And let's start with our first question. For you, what do you mean by collaborative leadership? Craig, if I could ask you to go first.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. So to me, collaborative leadership is really coming away from that more traditional way of leadership, which is very much top down, to actually engaging people right across the organisation in solutions to get their ideas and to get their buy-in and support for what you're trying to achieve. So very much about moving to a more modern, collaborative way of working, inclusive way of working to get everybody's views and thoughts.
Thank you, Craig. Julie, what about for you?
Yeah, and just to build on that, it's a shared responsibility which drives empowerment and encourages a broader diversity of ideas, opinions, and objectives. I mean, using a sort of simple example for me, if you think of an orchestra, it's made up of a number of different sections. You've got your strings, your brass, your woodwind, and these sections work together to create the musical performance. And the conductor's role is only there to direct and influence the outcome of the performance to the audience.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with those definitions in mind, what has been the best example of collaborative leadership you've seen and what's been the impact? Julie, would you like to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. Now, I mean, I've had the fortune to work in big firms and small firms, but the best collaborative leadership I've seen has generally been in smaller firms. Now, I think this is partly driven by employees wearing multiple hats, so naturally having a bit of a broader remit. But it's also, I think, driven by a greater understanding and exposure to the desired outcomes needed to be successful and be connected to this. In a larger firm, it's harder work for the leader to ensure their internal networks are fully functioning and that their teams are clear on how the work they're doing contributes to sort of the overall strategy and objectives. And I mean, this needs sort of constant reinforcement.
Okay, so that's an ongoing challenge I'm hearing you say for larger organisations.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Craig, is that similar to your experience or have you got something different?
I think collaborative leadership needs a commitment from the leader that's acting collaboratively. So I think it can be challenging, particularly in larger organisations where people are more disparate, to get some good examples of that, but not impossible. But I think it isn't easy in all cases. I think that some of the technology that's around nowadays probably helps, or certainly helps that, but it does take effort. I mean, I think that I wanted to just use an example really of Air Partner where I am now and some of the stuff that we've been doing in the last 12 months that I think is sort of demonstrates some good examples of collaborative leadership, and I'm sure that people on the call will have similar. But things like, for example, we used to not engage as many people in some discussions as we do now. So, for example, what we're seeing is working groups we've created a series of strategic working groups, which are made up of numerous people from across the business that might not have been considered to join those groups in the past. Now, that's taken effort to reach out to those people. It's obviously taken effort for those people to be part of those groups, but we're seeing massive benefits from that. Moving things like, for example, we used to have quarterly all hands or town hall meetings, moving those to monthly, and making sure that people are able to actually engage with those sessions, both pre the session with anonymous questions for leadership and also live during the session. So, you know, all of these sorts of things are great examples, I think, of leaders being collaborative and ensuring that we hear exactly what's going on in the business, and people feel they've got a way of letting us know as well.
And Craig, what's been the driver for that?
I think COVID, obviously, initially, because it forced that change of way of working. But I think as we've started to look at our engagement and understanding, you know, looking at things like engagement surveys, which we run every year, what are the areas where people genuinely want to get more involved in solutions? They want to be part of the solution. So I think there's been a natural drive, but clearly COVID has been a bit of a springboard to really motoring that in the last 12 to 14 months.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So when we did our research, we, as we said, lots came through about wanting to get people to do this collaboration piece. The pandemic clearly impacted that in order that we had to change the way we worked. So in your view, looking at leadership styles, how do you think they will change, or will they have to change in a post-pandemic world? Yeah,
I mean, I think leadership styles are changing, and I think for some people it will be easier than others. I think that one of the things that to do collaborative leadership well, I think it's important that people don't feel that leaders are abdicating responsibility, or that in some way passing responsibility to people lower in the organisation. So I think it still needs clarity of purpose, it still needs direction, it still needs guidance. You know, it's not a case of just setting something up and saying sort of over to you. So I think from that perspective, clear objectives. For example, our strategic working groups, we've got clear terms of reference for those. So people that are joining them know what's expected. And then there are clear measurements, milestones and measurements in place as well. So, for example, at those all hands meetings I referred to, what we've started to do in the last 2 of those is actually get people from those working groups to come and talk, to give the updates. So it's not just leaders. I think the other thing is we need to allow people not just to be part of the working group, but also to be able to share themselves with their colleagues, with the rest of the organisation, what they're doing and the impact that that's having. So that's some of the stuff that we're doing. So yeah, I do think leadership style will have to change.
Okay, and Julie, just before I come to you, Craig, what are you noticing in the way that leaders are adapting to be able to do that, to make that shift?
I mean, some early adopters took like duck to water with regard to things like Teams. Others have struggled. It's maybe not their preferred method of communication. So there are leaders who clearly are missing face-to-face interaction more than others. And I think for those that maybe have struggled with adjusting to that medium, I think you have to be more planned in this medium. You can't sort of just come into the office and if there's a group of people around, just get them together and, you know, find out the temperature of the organisation, for example. You've got to be more planned when using Teams. So I think there's support we need to give managers who find it less spontaneous to just jump on or set up Teams calls, for example, and regular collaboration. And that's really part of our job, to encourage those people and give them the tools.
Okay, so if they've got the tools, they're willing to get involved and look at how they can do things differently.
We've certainly seen that. We have seen that. I'm not going to try and pretend that everybody's on board with that, but we have seen it. And where there's success breeds success. So where groups have started to get benefits and they've started to see the opportunities and the sort of the success that they've managed to get from this process, that you generally start to see more people coming on board.
Okay, absolutely. And I've heard about that inclusivity, bringing people in to get involved. We may pick up on that again shortly. But Julie, what's your experience then? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's demonstrated that the command and control approach doesn't work. And in fact, you can't micromanage remotely. It's just not possible. And you sort of see people getting tied up in knots as a result of it. So, you know, this new way of working, I think, has allowed our collaborative leaders to flourish and sort of treat their virtual teams as, you know, they themselves would like to be treated. I mean, to give an example, sort of at the start of the first lockdown, which, gosh, seems a long time ago, you know, I was tasked with a new business group as a global people leader, but actually what I lost in not seeing them in person was kind of more than compensated by sort of that greater virtual access. You know, there was reduced business and personal travel, so there was more opportunity for real-time communication and collaboration, but also just everybody being on that same virtual platform rather than in different floors or in different offices or in different locations, which sort of then, by nature of itself, for those that really embraced it, you know, it really gave a greater emphasis on effective meetings and effective interaction.
That's great, thank you. I'm sorry, do you want to ask a question, Jane? I've got 3 questions that have come through, so it's up to you if you want to follow on.
A quick follow on, and then
Sure.
we'll come to those questions. So I'm hearing about equality coming through, greater equality in representation in some way, Julie. The virtual platform allowed people more access to people. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of broken down those sort of hierarchical boundaries, you know, and it's very much emphasis, you know, the emphasis has more been on that sort of equal contribution, for sure. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, Sarah, over to you for your question.
Okay, so this first one leads in quite nicely. So it's from Alison, and she says, how can you ensure collaboration is more visible in the remote working environment? So I don't know who wants to go with that one, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I think these strategic project groups that we've set up have been really useful in that, because we're about to actually create a collaboration area on our intranet, which will list out these different groups that exist and who's on them. So I think it gives people a bit of recognition, but also a bit more visibility about what those groups are doing. And then through sharing the output from those groups, either on the intranet, via email, normal communication methods, or at these town halls, I think, again, it gives more visibility about what's going on in the business. So certainly that's something that we've started doing. We've got a bit of a way to go on that.
Excellent. Anyone got anything else to add, or shall I go to the next question?
Go to the next question, I think, Sarah.
Okay, so some of these questions are getting a bit longer, so Joan and Craig, you might disappear a little. So Michael says, is it fair to say that some leaders are fearful of collaborative leadership? They feel they have to give up their autonomy to take decisions. So I can see Craig's nodding. And Julie, so Julie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely takes a lot of patience, and I think leaders who may need to rethink their style, are going to have to learn some new ways of getting things done. And I don't know if it's about fearful of losing the autonomy. I think they've perhaps I don't want to say grown up, perhaps in an organisation where there has been a certain style, and to change that style does require quite a shift in thought, and it definitely comes easier to some than others. But for those that I've worked with who have recognised they need to change their style, they have certainly, on the whole, been open to listen. But I think to Craig's earlier point, it doesn't come naturally to everybody.
Okay. And just on that, I mean, as you were speaking there, Julie, I was thinking about that element of control. I think for some leaders, whether it's autonomy, it's that sense of, I think it depends on their perception of what a leader is and how comfortable they are. Because some people do feel that they need to know all the answers because they're the leader. And I know whether it's a fear of the autonomy or not, I think for some people there is that letting go process that can be quite hard for them, and therefore that's part of the learning I think that people need to go through as we move to that more involving other people. They know it intellectually typically, don't they, that other people do have answers, but there is something about, and maybe it comes back a little to that command and control mentality. I'm the leader, therefore I should. And what we are all saying is actually, as the leader, it's about helping others come through and share that knowledge and have some of that decision making Again, interested in your thoughts on that. Maybe Craig, do you want to come in?
Well, one of the things I think is that maybe some leaders are concerned that through involving others, it will actually slow progress. And I think what we're seeing is actually it can speed progress, because actually getting people involved is more likely that the decision is going to land well in the business, as opposed to something coming from a top-down approach which hasn't been socialised, hasn't been understood, and might land badly. So again, it's almost the proof of the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. That people have got to sort of see this to believe it in a way. If you're not somebody who embraces it, but there will be examples around, and I encourage people to look at those examples and follow, because it will save time, and I think it does make sure engagement's a massive thing at the moment. We need to make sure our people engage, particularly on the back of COVID, and I think this is a great way to do it.
Excellent. This next comment is about kind of the employee's perspective, so I think that's quite a good follow on there. So sorry, I will read it out and then I will hide the question. So Catherine says, I love the idea of employees presenting their views to the leadership team. How have you ensured that people feel safe to do this? It can feel very intimidating going to those meetings. So I think if we hand that to you, Craig, as that was something that you brought up to start with.
Yeah, well, I think by nature there's groups, each working on these different strategic areas. So obviously the group elect who wants to do that. What we have seen, though, of course, is some people have got this on their personal development plan, perhaps to present to groups. I know one of my team presented, I won't say who, but they presented recently, and it was an area they were really nervous of doing, but they did a phenomenal job. And I think that sometimes, if it is something that somebody's looking to try to achieve, then that's great. But normally the group is there to support, so somebody normally will put their hand up and say, well, look, I'll do that, unless somebody else specifically has that down as something they want to do themselves. So I think it's about teamwork.
Excellent. Anything to add, Joan or Julie? We've got another 3 questions in, so
I think I would just quickly say, it's almost that constant reinforcement of contracting between teams and individuals and their leaders, in terms of ensuring that they know that it is a safe environment for them to be able to contribute.
And I think that's the key thing there, isn't it, about those conditions, making it safe. What are the leaders doing to help the individual feel comfortable and feel it's okay to come, present, say, give their view or whatever. Absolutely. Okay, back to you.
Okay, so we've got Stuart just saying hi. So hi, Stuart. And then we're on to Jeffrey. So again, I'll read this out and then hide the comment again. So an observation from Jeffrey. Craig is right in identifying needing to adapt leadership style. It is not just a process. It's about humans, as in your session title. You need to bring your true self to leading and help employees to do the same.
Very good.
Okay, very good. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
From that, again, that coming back to the whole human leadership piece, what are you seeing or what are you doing within your organisations to encourage people to bring their whole selves to work? Either of you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, we started to do quite a bit of work in this area. Again, it's all sort of it is work in progress, but things like, for example, looking at things like employee resource groups, with the view of allowing people to, and I think rather than create lots of employee resource groups, I think we're going to look to create that as a vehicle, an employee resource group that might touch on lots of different areas of interest for people, which hopefully will enable people. I mean, we've got the usual things like the D&I policy and things, but it really needs to come off the page and come into reality and into life. And I think that some of that representation of minorities, special interests, that sort of thing is what we want to try to tap into in the coming months.
And I think you make such a really good point, an important point there, Craig, about it needs to come off the page and into real life. It's when you're working with a particular subject area or issue, and it's about making it practical, isn't it? Helping people know how they can work in that way, whatever it might be, not just what it says in the policy that we need to do, but it's so important. And helping people, I suppose, getting people to talk about their experience, have experiences that that people can share with other people, so the stories are coming out and other people know it is okay, or whatever it might be, that people can be themselves at work. The more storytelling, the more sharing that's going on, the more it's likely to happen again, I think.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Julie, anything to add, or shall I move on to the next
No,
question?
mindful of
Okay.
time. Should we move on?
Great. Yeah, we're getting more and more questions now. So, so Joanna says, isn't it about moving from a parent-child relationship to an adult-adult relationship? And could the word collaboration be interchangeable with inclusive? So that kind of ties into what you were just saying there, Craig.
Yes.
So any comments on that one?
I think it's a real think about it's that trust and creating that environment of trust more than anything else, and thinking the best in people, actually, more than anything else.
Yeah.
Craig, if you want to add on that one.
Well, what I really liked about that comment was the treating people as adults, and I think that again, that's it's a development for that. If we go back to that command and control, there's more of that parent-child relationship. The expectation is you're sort of told what to do.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. That sort of leadership style really needs to be a thing of the past. It is now about engaging people. And if you can't engage people, I don't think you're going to get the best solutions. We might all be good at what we do, but we're none of us perfect, and none of us have all of the answers. So clearly, by engaging people in your organisation, I think you're going to hear things, even if you don't at first admit it. You are going to perhaps adapt your solutions, from what you hear from others, and I think there's a lot to be gained from it.
And the question about can collaboration be interchangeable with inclusive? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're both quite interesting. They're both really good words. Whether they're interchangeable, I don't know. I haven't really given it much thought specifically on those two words, but I think both are good words. And I think to be truly collaborative, you probably are inherently being inclusive. So maybe they are interchangeable, but I haven't given a lot of thought to it per se.
Yeah, okay, it's worth trying it out. I have to say, I would go out and testing it out on people to see what they think.
Yeah.
Get on the inclusive leader, the collaborative leader. Do people take different things from it?
Yeah. Well, maybe once you've had to think about it, you could go on and answer this question online, and that might help start a bit of a conversation. So, okay. So the next one, we did touch upon this in our prep call. So Sian is asking, could our speakers please share one example of how they have improved collaboration in their own HR teams?
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So thank you, Sian. So Craig, do you want to start on that one again?
Yeah, sure. So once COVID struck, I have a small leadership team, and when COVID struck, we decided that we were going to have daily calls, so Teams calls. So we set up an hour every day of the week in the morning, suitable to people's diaries, to really just talk through how we were going to respond to what were quite significant challenges everyone on this call would have had around COVID. Gradually, it became apparent that every day was too much after about the first sort of 3 or 4 months. But we were clearly still in crisis management mode. So we moved to 3 times a week. And when I mentioned to the team about, I asked them for their feedback, and they said, we don't want them to stop. So we actually still have them 3 times a week, just for an hour. And what I've been told, what the team tell me is that, and I can see this, is that people are working much more closely together. People understand what's on each other's agendas. We're much more team oriented in terms of solution solving. People come to the table with items. It's not all driven by me by any stretch of the imagination. So people add things to the agenda. They're very live meetings. They do typically only last an hour. We do fill the hour. We don't tend to run over. They're frequent enough so that we don't have to, so they respect people's other priorities. But that's certainly something that the team have loved and want to continue.
Great. Julie, are you going to?
Just to build on that, in my new organisation, my immediate team is very small, but we have 2 portfolio companies that have their own HR teams. And we very much need to have a collaboration between all of us in order to achieve both the group objectives as well as the individual portfolio company objectives. But I think what I've really noticed in the last few weeks is how much technology has enabled this. I had a call with my Australian team this morning, and there's no sound gap anymore. You might as well be, in the same office, in the same room, and anything other than the fact we're on a screen. It's as if we're in the same room. And I do think the progress in technology, if we think about how it was even a couple of years ago when we just had Skype, it's profound, for sure.
Great.
So technology has been an enabler to help you be more collaborative, help your teams be more collaborative. Great.
Yeah.
Great. So we've got about 5 minutes left today. So I'm going to just go through another couple of the questions. So not sure who this one's from, but whilst recognising the need for more collaborative leadership, how do you ensure that leaders remain accountable? So Julie, would you like to start on that one?
I think for leaders, it's more about, it's about being the introducer, it's acting as the connector between the different teams. And really, they're there to use the influence to drive the debate, ensure the right discussion with the right people. So, the leaders are always there to open the gate, but ultimately it doesn't detract from being ultimately accountable, for the safety and protection of the team, but also in delivering what that key objective may be for that organisation. I think is what I'd say. Craig, I don't know if you've got any additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think the accountability clearly still sits with the leader, and that's why when I go back to the working groups that we've got, there is an executive sponsor and there is a leader for the particular group. The leader doesn't have to be a manager, but there certainly needs to be an exec sponsor, because I think that what you can't have is abdication. So collaborative leadership isn't about just chucking your problems over the fence and hoping somebody else sorts them.
Okay, happy for you to go to the next question?
Absolutely.
So Joanna asked a very similar question, so I've just put Danny's up on the screen as it's a different person. So he's saying here, what tips would you have for leaders trying to create a psychologically safe space?
Thank you, Danny, for the question. Another great one. Craig, would you like to go first?
Julie can go first.
Oh, okay. I think first of all, it's being human. I think we touched on it earlier. It takes a humanistic approach, being selfless, and having an understanding of oneself. And the other thing I sort of feel is, overnight we've ended up in each other's houses and each other's lives, and sort of no boundary anymore between home and work. And I think it's ripped the mask off that leader in the ivory tower. So I think really it's we're all equal, we're all in the same place, and we've all got common goals in mind. So I think it's just being humble and realistic more than anything else in terms of how leaders are approaching what they need to get done.
And I think on that, there is something about, to help people, and we touched upon it a bit earlier about when people come to present or whatever, but it's really important, if you ask people for their views, that you treat it with respect, even if you're not going to go with what they have said. You explain to them, you acknowledge their view. I think a lot of it is about acknowledgement and validation, whether acceptance or not is there. So it comes back to that point. If you treat people as a human being and have the respect for them in that way, then be treating or saying to them around what you're going to do, I think is so important. Craig, what would you say?
Yeah, I agree, Joan. I mean, the example I gave of the person who presented at our last all hands town hall, I mean, we did a dry run of that presentation for that person on the basis that we knew that they were anxious about it. So doing that dry run, I think no doubt helped them to feel more confident. They were able to get a couple of hints and tips from other people about what they might do. So I think it's not about just sort of, throw people to the lambs to the slaughter. It is about making sure that you're supporting people, that they feel that they have that support from managers so that it is safe.
Yeah, and the other thought that I know we're just about out of time, but the other thought around that is, creating that space where it is true that it's okay if you make a mistake, that as long as you learn from it. So again, that thing about whether it is in presenting or speaking or doing something, that you're knowing you'd rather people tried things and got it wrong than didn't try at all, but also that they know that no harm will come to them, in a sense, that they will be safely treated, I suppose, in a way, that they will be psychologically, etc., that they will be okay if something does go wrong.
Yeah. Can I put just one final question on, and then everyone else's questions will come to in the comments, because we are running out of time. So this question here from Verity. So what she's saying is it would be real and helpful to talk about some difficult challenges. So I know, Craig, you mentioned earlier that, you know, not everyone liked the ideas that you were coming up with initially. So is there anything we can quickly touch on here about things that have been difficult?
I mean, I think in all circumstances, in every organisation, there's going to be areas of difficulty. So, I mean, it's not to try to portray that we're perfect in any way, or that everything is plain sailing. As I said before, you know, that some people adopt collaborative leadership in an easier way than others. So Julie said, you know, some people feel more comfort in the command and control style. I think it's about education. And our job is to make sure that we listen to those. We try to understand where those people are coming from, ultimately, and try to get them to change. Because I think that they would find the experience, if they came away from that and chose to adopt collaborative leadership, I think they would find their own job more fulfilling. So I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. Clearly, people who can't adapt, depending on the organisation you're in, well, it may be time for them to think of doing something else, moving on.
Yeah. And I think, certainly going back to the research that we did last year and that came out in the white paper, some of the examples we were hearing there was very much around that people who didn't want to adjust, who were finding it too much, or the conversation was very much that they will need to either learn to, or they will have to look at to do something else, because what the world of work, what people are looking for now, is the leaders who will make that shift and will be much more inclusive or collaborative in the way that they operate. So Verity, we'll keep thinking about that. I appreciate that you're looking at some challenges, and what we can do is pick that up after this session and see what other examples we can come up with and share after today. If you're willing to do that, that would be great.
Yeah.
Great. So as I said, there are more questions, but we will address those offline. So back over to you, Joan, to just kind of wrap up.
Okay. Well, the 30 minutes has gone really quickly. I feel here for quite some time, and probably get into those discussions around difficulty. So Julie, Craig, thank you very much for being here. You know, it's been interesting to hear what's happening in your organisations, both in terms of things that you're doing and what you're seeing your leaders doing. I'm heartened that there are examples of where people are being much more collaborative, and I suppose my hope is that that continues as we move out of the post-pandemic world. Fingers crossed, she says, as we do that. And obviously we're interested to hear other examples that people have around it. So do feel free to share with us through LinkedIn or whatever the examples you've got. Let's see if we can get some conversation and a bit of a movement going around how we can help leaders be collaborative. So again, Julie, Craig, thank you very much for your time. Sarah, thank you for brilliantly hosting and facilitating us in the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And there's lots of conversation going on in the comments as well. So that's really great to see. People are talking to each other and answering questions. So as I said, we will go in, check all of those comments, and we will be back on the 10th of June, where Joan will be talking about the Ambion leader. So thanks to everyone that's joined. Thanks for all of the comments. Thanks to our guests, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.